I want to speak for a second about 28 Summers. So I have said out loud that 28 Summers is my favorite of all my books. And I'm not really sure why that is, how that happened. Just sort of all these pieces came together. It is based on the film and the play, Same Time Next Year. That film and play, the film stars Alan Alda and Ellen Bernstein. There are a couple who meet at a hotel restaurant in 1951 in a coastal hotel in Santa Barbara, and they fall in love, and they return every year for the next umpteen years. And they have sort of, their relationship changes as the times change, that's sort of the shtick. And when I watched the movie as a child, it imprinted, obviously, because I remembered it. And then as I watched it again as an adult, I realized how simplistic the movie is, because it was written as a play, so it only has 1.5 sets. We're mostly set in their hotel room, and there are a few scenes in the hotel restaurant. Other than that, we don't go into their other lives, their lives at home. We never see them anywhere else. And so I thought, well, this is really a rich territory for exploring. Could I write about this kind of relationship and do go into their other lives? And that's exactly what this novel does. So Mallory Blessing, in the summer of 1993, gets a phone call from her father saying her aunt has died and left Mallory a cottage on the beach in Nantucket, which of course I say, do these things really happen in real life? Obviously they do, because off she goes. And she makes Nantucket her home, and very independently. She grew up in Baltimore. She gets a teaching job. Her very first summer, her brother's getting married for the first time. By the time the novel is over, he will have been married 5 times. But the first time he gets married, he'd like to have his bachelor party or his bachelor weekend at her cottage, and he brings his friend from college, Jake McLeod. Jake and Mallory fall in love. All these weird things happen that very first night that they're together, and it bonds them together, and they decide that, like the people in Same Time Next Year, they're gonna do this every summer, no matter what. That's their thing, no matter what. And I am here to tell you, you guys, that ended up being very tricky for this author, because so many things happen. Like, he has a life, he's married to a woman who's running for president in 2020. They both have children. And how do they get back together for 28 Summers? It's very hard. I came to the conclusion that you cannot actually conduct this kind of affair. It's too complicated. It's pragmatically virtually impossible. So, but in my novel, I manipulate and get them together for 28 Summers. So I'm very proud of this book. There are characters from my other novels who make appearances in various summers. And so that's fun for people who've read a lot of my books, because they're, reading along, and then they'll see a character from the Winter Street series. They'll see the chief from a number of my books, or Dabney from The Matchmaker. And my social media messages are filled with people like, I can't believe you put this character in, and it was so fun to see them. So that's something else to look forward to. And it has been optioned for the movies by a studio called MRC. They made a film recently called Knives Out, and they're making The Nightingale. Yeah, they're making The Nightingale with Kristen Hanna. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, Hollywood has been something of a cruel mistress to me, but hopefully we will see this on the big screen.
Can you say more about that? So you've been optioned, and I know authors often are just waiting in the wings. Someone options your book. How does that work? And why is there so much lag time, and what gets made and what doesn't, and how it works?
Right. So it is so complicated. Basically, the studio optioned the property. So they paid me a small amount of money. They now have the option to make the movie. It's the producer who is then her responsibility to hire a writer, get a script. The studio is going to make it. So, the studio is on board, so that's good. So we don't have to pitch it to studios. we have the studio, so we just need the script, and then we try and get stars attached. And then you get funding from the studio. Sometimes you take production partners in, and then you start shooting. So I'm not sure what stage Hollywood is in, even if, I mean, there's a pandemic, so I know nobody is shooting presently. I talked to Kristen Hanna this morning. She said that they hope to go to, they were in Bulgaria filming The Nightingale in March when I sold this, and they all had to go home. So production ceased. They intend to go back in September, so hopefully that will happen for her. And, you know, so once we get the ball rolling and we get a script and we get stars, then hopefully we can go right into production. And my dream, it's not going to have, you know, we have to have some of it filmed in summer in Nantucket. So hopefully next summer it will be filmed in Nantucket to come out the summer of 22.
That sounds great.
Fingers crossed, you guys. We'll see.
Fingers crossed. I met you here at RJ's a couple of years ago when you were here, and now I'm a groupie. I admit it. But I want to give a shout out. It's so fun following you on social media. There's so many pieces to you aside from what a wonderful author you are. But I want to give a shout out. It's worth your cooking shows. Your recipes are terrific. I guess, and I think during this time, I just felt like I was sort of traveling with you when you were in St. John, when you were even driving us through the streets of Nantucket. So do you like that social media piece? You seem to really. So
it's so funny because I only learned how to do Instagram stories in January during my during my fan weekend, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so I just learned how to do Instagram stories. I had no idea how to do them. I hired a friend. I have 3 teenagers, and my middle child is a boy, and his former girlfriend did my Instagram stories last year when I was on tour. And then finally I was like, I need to learn how to do this myself. So once I figured out the stories, then I was like off to the races. When I got to St. John, you know, the Paradise series is very popular. And so I thought, I bet people want to see video footage of St. John and feel like they're here. And then and I got there on the 11th of March, and things in that first week got very real very quickly. And I normally stay 5 weeks. I ended up staying 7 weeks until the end of April. And finally it was like too much chocolate cake. I'm like, I have to go home. But I was able to get a lot of video footage for the reader so they could see St. John. And I, you know, tried to relate it to places that were in the books. And then when I got home, you know, I do this cooking show. It's called Cringe Cooking. It's called Cringe Cooking because my children are so embarrassed by it. Again, my middle son, my middle child, Dawson, he's like, this is so cringe. You must stop. He was texting me from work. He's like, you must stop the cringe, the cooking show. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to call it the Cringe Cooking Show. I'm not going to stop. And you know, a few months ago when we were all like very heavily in quarantine, like I broke out my Instapot, which I had never used. And I thought, let's just try this. And I took videos and it worked perfectly. And so it's been really fun. And I really try and speed it along because I get very bored very quickly. So I, you know, try and just give you the highlights and then tell you where you can find the recipe. But I film things, and there are some things that I filmed that didn't taste good, and I will not post it unless I really love it. So I think one of the things that people are responding to in the Instagram stories is they are completely authentic and organic. And I don't have any advertisers. I don't want any advertisers. It's all things that like I cook and places I go and things that I experience. And I just want to share it.